welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 523. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's up, buddy? How are you? You just couldn't help yourself, could you?
Well, ever since someone tweeted at us saying, you know, if I don't hear the two cool guys intro, it's going to be a snoozer.
By the way, that is just tweet of the year. Like you and I got really a lot of. I know it's going to be a lot of value out of that tweet. We've been laughing about that since it went up, and that was like a few months ago. So, yeah, I guess you did have
incredible button there. Yeah. So no, I'm doing great. Cube is up. Been doing a ton of that. And really just looking forward to this episode.
We got a sweet episode lined up for you. Before we get into the episode, got to mention our sponsor channel, fireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all things magic related, including leading up to the holidays here. They've got sales every day for 12 days leading up to Christmas, I guess. And so you want to make sure you check out the site every day to see what the new deal is there. And of course, if you'd like to sell some of your cards back to Channel Fireball, you can go to channelfireball.com/buy list, and they will give you a 30% bonus if you trade them in for store credit, for a gift, for yourself, or for somebody else, or whatever. So that is the deal there. Of course, the show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. That's right. This show is very much listener supported, and we appreciate each and every one of you who've taken the time to head over to the Patreon, check things out, and even support the show. You can do so at patreon.com/limited resources. Now, before we get into everything here, we're going to do a crack pack in just a minute, but we got to bring in our special guest back on the show. It's the real, the number one, the TBS, Ben Seck. Ben, what's going on, buddy? Yeah!
Marshall, I lose. I last time I was on, I don't think there was as many soundboard sounds, so this is a little disorienting.
Yeah. Tell me about it, buddy. It's extremely disorienting.
We're all about constantly improving the podcast. We're all about trying to figure out.
I don't know about improving, but I'll say it's changing.
Well, we're super happy to have you back on TBS because we are going to be doing another one of the set reviews that Luis and TBS like to concoct here. We did one for Alpha a while back, actually almost 2 years ago now. And this one is going to be on the earliest expansions for Magic. That's Arabian Nights and Antiquities. So we're going to be going over those now ancient sets and taking a look at them from a modern viewpoint, design-wise, and just sort of as a modern Magic player to see how it goes. But of course, first, we've got to crack a pack. And, well, since we're doing Arabian Nights, we may as well just open up an Arabian Nights pack here, right? See what
hold on. Where'd you get yourself the Arabian Nights pack?
I just had, just got them laying around. Just a pile of them. Just grabbed one off the pile. First card out. I can never remember. There's only uncommons and commons in these packs. They always confuse me. The first one is Jandor's Ring, 6 mana for a mono artifact. You can pay 2 to discard a card you just drew from your library and draw another card to replace it. Next one is Island of Wak Wak. It's a land. It does not tap for mana, which is that's a design thing that they don't do anymore. But it does tap to reduce target flying creature's power to 0. All right. Graders, one and a black. If you do not, it's a 2/3 for 2. If you do not attack with it, they do 2 damage to you at the end of turn. Raiders do no damage to you during the turn in which they are summoned. Still, I would play that one. Next card is Desert Nomads, and that is 2 and a red for a 2/2 Desert Walk. Desert Nomads are immune to damage done by deserts. Hey, I get it. Let's see. Next card is Fish Liver Oil, 1 and a blue. Enchant creature. Target creature gains Island Walk ability. And that is exactly how it's written on the text, by the way. Next is Stone Throwing Devils, black for a 1/1 first striker. Okay.
This card was
really
great back
First
then.
strike
I
was
loved it.
Black first strikers were really rare.
Yeah, that is not currently in the color pie, right? Or maybe every once in a while for them now. Metamorphosis is next. It's green for a sorcery. It says sacrifice a creature of yours in play for an amount of mana equal to its casting cost +1. This mana can be of any one color and can only be used to summon creatures. Yikes. And the last one is Hasran Ogress. Black for a 3/2 ogre. Unless you pay 2 each time Hasran Ogress attacks, Hasran Ogress does 3 damage to you. This is actually a nice back.
Oh, yeah. I would probably just take Island of Walk. It's just so powerful to just shut down any
flyers
flyers
around.
I guess we haven't determined which set we're drafting exactly. If it's just all Arabians, you still have Djinns and Afrits to deal with.
What would you take?
I like the Black Beatdown decks. I mean, you have like Urg Raiders now, Stone Throwing Devils, and Hazran Ogres. I'm going to hope to wheel one of them and take one of them. So I might take like Urg Raiders and hope that no one wants to play like double black cards and, get the Ogress on the wheel.
I got bad news for you about the wheel thing here, TBS. There's only 8 cards in the pack.
Yeah, I was kind of curious how that was going to happen.
It's a 4-man draft.
Okay, a 4-player draft. I like your chances of wheeling the Ogress. I like it. I like where TBS is at. I'm going Urg Raiders Beatdown. That's it. I'm not taking Jandor's Ring either. Okay, so there's our Crack-A-Pack. That's in the books. Now it's time to get into the actual sets. So let's do them in order that they came out in real life. That means that Arabian Nights comes out first. And then we're going to do Antiquities after that. But before we get into both of them, I wanted to throw it to you guys to talk a little bit about expansion sets, because these are the first expansion sets for Magic.
Yeah. So at the time, Alpha had been printed. I guess Beta had also been printed before Arabians came out. Is that correct?
I actually think even Unlimited had been out before Arabians. Yeah.
Oh, even Unlimited. So the same base set had been printed a few times, mainly because of demand. There hadn't been an expansion yet, and it wasn't clear what that was going to mean, because Magic's original concept ended up being in a very different place, or at least how Richard Garfield had kind of assumed people were going to interact with cards, because originally, you look at a card like Black Lotus or Ancestral Recall, and I think we talked about this during our Alpha review. Those cards weren't. It's not that Richard didn't think those were or thought those cards were balanced back then. He knew they weren't balanced, but it didn't matter, because the way most people were assumed to interact with Magic is open a starter, maybe a couple, play with their friends. Maybe one of you would have an Ancestral in your whole play group. There wasn't like a 4-card limit, because how would you get 15 lightning bolts anyway? You're just playing with a limited pool of cards. It didn't turn out Magic was as incredible as we know it is, and people were buying just thousands of cards, and that's why some of these rules started to get made. So for the expansion, I think originally it might have been like, oh, we'll rotate out the old cards, and here's the new cards you can play with, or we're gonna make an expansion, and because it's a new thing, it's going to have a different back. That was actually true for a while, for a very long time, up until right before it got printed, that it was going to just have a different card back, because it was a different set of the game.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, right to the last minute, and I think the concept of like mixing cards didn't really kind of like enter the consciousness until that change, and it's amazing to think what Magic could have been if every set had to be played just internally and never being able to mix them. In fact, I think we could say that maybe Magic wouldn't have been as rich given that kind of schema.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read about this. The reason why it's called Magic the Gathering was that the Gathering was meant to be the initial set. Right, the initial stage of Magic, if you will. And then it was supposed to come out with standalone after standalone after standalone that would be named. So the Gathering was sort of the general name for the original set, and then it was going to be Magic Arabian Nights, and then Magic Antiquities, and you would play with those cards and not mix them with the other cards.
In the back would say Magic Antiquities, not
right,
Magic
and it in fact did up until
like
apparently quite close for in the case of Arabian Nights, where they actually had designed fully another Magic back for the card.
Yeah, it was a pink background card. It looked really, really weird.
Yeah, and I believe it's on the box.
It looked especially looked weird because we know what Magic cards look like.
That's true. Okay, well, so these are of course incredibly big steps for Magic just as a game, and they were still very much getting their footing under them as far as understanding how their game would be consumed, and they were learning on the fly as they went, as evidenced by some of the changes they made seemingly last minute, particularly with Arabian Nights. And so that's where we should start, right? Arabian Nights was, in fact, the first expansion set for Magic, and it is the first of what would become, basically 4 expansions a year since the game came out. So, we're talking about a ton of them at this point. And this idea of adding cards to a game that already existed on a regular basis, and therefore rejuvenating, refreshing, changing, adding to the lore, the rules, everything like that, was really fantastic, right? I mean, this is the killer app for Magic, because Magic was a great game if you just bought a starter pack of alpha or whatever. But this is what made it into a lifestyle and, a game that you could follow for years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what really made it so you could be a game that basically lasts forever, because if alpha was the proof of concept, Arabian was showing what could come.
Okay, well, let's get into Arabian Nights, and then we'll do Antiquities after that. Where should we start as far as Arabian Nights stuff goes?
I think we should start with the story. I mean, one thing that we kind of take for granted now is like how the Magic is the storyline of Magic is like interweaved into the cards. Mm-hmm. And just like how expansions were a new concept, having kind of expanding stories was also a new concept. And in fact, you get to see some of the trials they had early on. Arabians is actually based on like real world fantasy. There's a set of stories called the 1001 Arabian Nights, which is based on a lot of Arabic folklore. And all these cards actually have like a lot of like connections to that storyline. In fact, some of them actually refer to real people and real places in history. I mean, Bazaar of Baghdad. Obviously, Baghdad exists as a place, but
Library of Alexandria.
The library, was one of the 7 wonders of the world, and it's now a card. And so the way that the story is, the historical story is, there's this a story of a princess who gets married to a king who's killing his wife every night, and this princess is basically telling stories to keep the story going, and these are the stories that come from that. And so a lot of the things like Alibaba, Aladdin, they all come from these storylines.
And if you want to get even more meta, that whole story is also a card in the set.
We'll get to that story, because that card is actually one of my favorites.
Oh well, it's one of the loudest cards in the set. So yeah, we'll definitely.
Yeah, some of the interesting things too, just about these sets, as they came out way back in the day, where they were actually a lot different in size and the way that the packs were made and all these different things. Can you guys touch on that for, rewind us a little bit back to December of 1993 when Arabian Nights first came out?
So Arabian Nights is like, as you said before, it's a pretty small set. I think it's like 80 odd cards.
78,
yeah. And so one of the things that is hard to do is that it's hard to have a lot of like commons, uncommons, and rares with that smaller card set. In fact, the way the sheets worked was there's 121 cards on each sheet that they printed Magic on. And so the way that they kind of mimicked a lot of rarity was actually to put higher and lower frequency of cards on there. And so what you have on for Arabian Nights is like things they call Uncommon 1, which means they appeared once on the sheet, and Uncommon 3, which means they appeared 3 times on the Uncommon sheet. And so they kind of put them together like in that way, and that's why the set's so small and still has a little bit of variability in the packs.
And then they came in packs of 8 cards when you bought them back then, which is kind of funny. If you pick up a booster pack with only 8 cards in it, which of course I just did, they don't weigh very much. They're actually very small, and it's kind of funny because you can see that they were really trying to make this set be, ancillary to the main set. It was like, oh well, there's the real big set, and then you get these little packs with these, only 8 cards in them there as well.
Also makes booster draft kind of hard.
Yeah, you did. We did learn that, didn't we, TBS? Your wheel prospects get kind of rough, and we should mention that too when it comes to the sort of the broad strokes on the set as well. Booster draft didn't exist yet, right?
Oh no. Limited existed insofar as a lot of the way people engaged with Magic was to open a starter or a couple packs or some combination and just play with those cards. I know I certainly did. Like the first time I built a quote unquote deck, it was just the contents of a revised starter and a couple packs of the dark. And at first it was actually even just, here's all these cards put together. And then you get a little bit more, a little bit more used to actually building decks. But for the most part, that's how people interacted with Magic, and people got better and better at like collecting the cards they wanted and making the right decks. But Booster Draft didn't exist. Like if it did, I didn't know about it.
And another thing, I think when expansions came out back then, people still didn't know the contents of the set. You'd actually still see new cards that you've never seen before. Like, I did not know all the cards in Arabians probably until maybe like a few months after the set had been released. And so it's really interesting. You say, oh, wow, these cards are very rare. It's like Arabians is a relatively small print run, so it's very easy not to actually see some of the cards.
It's really hard not to like understate how much exploration was and mystery was back then. And I'm not saying that's a better world, but like it was so cool that you would go to the card store, and I remember this happening for like multiple years, and someone would just play cards you'd never seen before. Like they would play a card or a deck, like where even if you knew what the cards did, no one had ever combined them in such a way that you had seen, and you're like, wow, that's incredible. So part of what's so cool about Arabians is, first of all, that the set is dripping with flavor, right? And I think that's a big reason that the set is, I consider it a very big success. And you're playing with someone and they play King Solomon, or they play Aladdin, or they play a Juzam Jin, and you're just like, whoa, because you might not have even known what these cards did or where they, it's not like it was easy to find a list of everything of all the cards.
Okay, so let's get into the designs then, because this is, of course, the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about here are the cards themselves and the designs around those cards. So where should we start as far as addressing this stuff?
I definitely think we want to start with top-down designs, because that is the biggest selling point for me for Arabian Nights. Especially because, again, there were some people who knew what they were doing in Magic, and people were getting smarter and better, about the game as time went on. But for the most part, the game, the way people interacted with the game can be described as fairly casual, because there weren't like big tournaments. There were every now and then tournaments. People would play against each other, but like there were barely formats. I don't even think by then there were formats were even a thing, right? I think it was just Magic. So the power level of the set is not quite as important to me, even though Arabian had some bangers. But I think it's just how fun were the cards and how resonant were the cards. And when we talk about top-down designs, we're talking about a card that you think of a cool concept. Like, for example, we'll take one off of the list that we were talking about, which was Desert Nomads, I think is a wonderful top-down, where Desert Nomads have Desert Walk. Of course they do. They can go through the desert better than anyone else, right? How could you catch them if they're going through the desert? So they're unblockable if the opponent had a desert. And they didn't take damage from deserts because, of course, they know how to live in the desert. And for those of you who don't know what desert is, it's a land that taps to deal 1 to an attacking creature. Well, I think it's like end of combat, though. Desert Nomads is you take the concept of what would Desert Nomads do, and then you make a card around it. Or another really good example is Aladdin. From the story, Aladdin, steals the lamp, right? And even the picture is kind of a guy holding a lamp. Aladdin steals artifacts. So that's taking the concept of this rogue dude who can steal artifacts and making it into a magic card in the way that makes the most sense, which isn't Aladdin steals target lamp, because that would be even more flavorful, but it wouldn't actually do anything. No, like you'd play against someone who has specifically a lamp. That's not very fun. But making them steal any artifact is great. And look, the flavor breaks down a little bit when Aladdin, steals something gigantic, right? Which is like, that doesn't make sense. How is he going to like sneak in there and pick up, a worm coil engine or whatever? But it kind of doesn't matter, because that you made the most flavorful version within the rules. And that's kind of where top downs come from, and they really shine. Like TBS, what are some of your favorite top downs?
And actually some of the best top downs that I like, the ones that have taught me something about the storyline itself. I mean, first of all, like Old Man of the Sea. This is not a very well-known Arabian Night, but it's about this old guy basically who wraps his legs around Sinbad, I think, Sinbad's neck, and
he convinces Sinbad to pick him up and to take him across the river.
And he won't let go until Sinbad gets him drunk and lets him go, basically, or kills him. And anyway, but
well, yeah, he smashes him with a rock. The stories here are maybe a little bit, but the whole point is he controls Sinbad's every action, right? And
and I think I totally agree with you. Like, top-down designs do not have to, like, letter by letter basically tell the story. They just need to kind of like provide inspiration. I mean, Alibaba, these are great examples.
Yeah, we should read these cards, guys. Like, we're just blasting through Aladdin and Old Man of the Sea and stuff, and like people don't know. Like, these are a lot of the people listening weren't born when these cards were made.
Well, to be clear, I
did not read the card. Like you said, it steals artifacts. But, like, you should read what it does, because that's the translation. Also, there's some super.
All right, Old Man of the Sea.
There's also some super juicy text on these cards, like artifact is returned when Aladdin is removed from play or when game ends.
Well, okay. So here's Aladdin. 2 red for a 1/1. Summon Aladdin. It's 1 red and tap to take control of an artifact from opponent. Artifact is returned when Aladdin is removed from play or when game ends. Actually, you said it as a joke, but the when game ends part is important here, because it's again, we're trailblazing here. We're having to spell out some stuff because it's not really been done before. I guess Control Magic was in alpha, but that also specified the same thing. These cards were written correctly to an audience that had never seen something like this before. I could see 11-year-old me thinking, well, I stole your Soul Ring with Aladdin. What?
Totally. Especially when ante was a thing and cards were actually changing hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ante exists too. So it looks funny to our modern sensibilities, but I mean, even on Twitter the other day, Gabby asked, what are some noob mistakes you made when you first started playing? Me and my friends didn't realize walls couldn't attack. And we didn't realize cards like Wall of Water, which says blue gets +1/+0. That's the revised text, but it means +1/+0 until end of turn. We didn't know it lasted until end of turn because it didn't say it on the card. So we just thought this was just an awesome attacker that grew bigger and bigger every turn. Right now, I remember when they started putting reminder text on walls that said walls can't attack. I was, everyone's like, why did they need to say that? That's for noobs. And it's like, yes, it's for noobs. Also, everyone was a noob back then. Like you actually do want to spell these things out. But yes, that's what Aladdin does. And then Old Man of the Sea is 1 blue for a 2/3, and it can tap to take control of a target creature with power less than Old Man of the Sea's toughness, which is very weird. And then you don't have to untap it, but you lose control of it if you untap it, or Old Man of the Sea does. Power. The power has to be. It can take control of a creature with equal to or less than power than itself. So it can steal a 2-drop. It can steal a 2 power creature or less, unless you pump Old Man of the Sea.
Yeah, no, I mean, just I think Arabians really gave me a window into actually the storyline. So I like how the top down kind of goes both ways, where you're like firstly learning about the storyline, or if you knew about the storyline, you actually get to kind of. If you didn't know about the storyline, you get actually to learn about the story. Other good ones are like Alibaba. Alibaba's like a 1 red 1/1. He's actually a summon Alibaba. I think he might be he might be human now, but
he's actually a human rogue now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense because he pays 1 red to tap a wall. He's a character in the storyline that says "Open Sesame." To kind of get to the treasures, and so obviously if he's opening the gate by tapping the wall.
That's great. I love that.
And some of the other top downs that I like are ones that kind of like stretch the boundaries of Magic itself too. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's stretching the boundaries, but Repentant Blacksmith is actually a really, really big favor of mine when I first started playing Magic. Protection was really, it was only I think on White Knight like apart from the wards and stuff like this, White Knight and Black Knight. So creatures didn't have that much protection, and protection to me happened to be, you know, one of two colors, and seeing that protection could be extend to red was really important. So Repentant Blacksmith is like a 1 white and 1/1/2 that has protection for red. That's it. It doesn't actually do anything else, but it shows you something about Blacksmith. They work with fire, but also they're used to working with fire, so they have protection from red.
What are the ones you like, Luis, for top down stuff? Because the thing that stands out when you read like a bunch of these cards in a row is that we use top down designs now, like Wizards does, kind of occasionally, right? And here it feels like almost every card was like, oh, we should make a blank, you know, from the book, or something that has to do with the theme or the setting or whatever. And then they make the card, you know, in a straight up top down thing. There's very few of these cards that you could see were put in for, you know, what we would call like development reasons or something, you know, something that, well, we need a card to fill a certain role. It was all just like, oh, we should make a flying carpet, and we should make, you know, things that you would see in the setting that they had. I mean, it dominates this entire set. Like basically the whole thing is top down.
It completely permeates it, and to be fair to sets that aren't Arabian Nights, which I do love Arabian Nights. It's cheating a little bit because it is steeped in real world mythology, like actual real world. It's not like Theros, where Theros is like, you know, Theros is like the Greek gods or something, or, you know, Eldraine is Brothers Grimm. Like Theros and Eldraine and sets like that are parallel versions of those settings, right? Theros doesn't have Zeus in it. And Arabian Nights actually, partially because it was the first, partially because they thought it was cool, whatever confluence of reasons, it's actual real world, like Arabian Nights fables. So because of that, the resonance is just going to be higher, because like Sinbad and, you know, Alibaba and, you know, Aladdin, I all have like real world stories to them. So when you make a concept from them, it especially if you do a good job, which they did, it becomes very, you know, very easy to tell that link. And they're kind of trading on the fact that all these things have all this history. So it's a little harder because, like, if you want to make Oko, you know, well, set aside Oko's development issues. If you want to make Oko kind of the highlight, or Garruk or whatever, it's a little harder because those don't exist outside of Magic. And so you can make a Garruk top down and it'll feel like Garruk, but it just doesn't have 1,000 years of lore behind it. And Arabian did a really good job tapping into that. So some of my other like favorite top downs, like King Solomon, who, you know, he destroys all the jinns and ifrits. He's a 1 and a white for a 1/1 to tap to destroy target jinn or ifrit. Like, and you know, I think he does a pretty good job of he does exactly what, you know, like the lore of King Solomon would be.
Can we talk about Shahrazad?
Flying carpet. we will. Don't worry. TBS. We're getting ready to enter the sub podcast within the original podcast. Flying carpet was one you mentioned, and that was I think one of the best examples of a top down, because it's a 4-mana artifact. You can pay 2 to gives one creature flying ability until end of turn. If that creature is destroyed before end of turn, so is flying carpet. So basically, it lets a creature fly. Duh, that's what a flying carpet does. But if the creature dies, the carpet, you know, crashes or gets, you know, destroyed as well, which also makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's great. Also, this, you know, reminds me of an early take on equipment.
Yeah, it actually kind of is,
which I think is cool.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of early takes on everything in this set. I think, you know, even like a top down card like Rook Egg, like, the concept of death triggers are very common now, but actually, you know, back then this was actually the first time that they'd really tried something like this, and it's so flavorful. It's an egg, and if you crack it, it becomes like the rook itself. And I think it's really easy to kind of like. Sorry, let me read it exactly. So it's 1 red and 3. It's a summon egg. If a rook egg goes to the graveyard, a rook, a 4/4 red flying creature, comes into play on your side at the end of that turn. Use a counter to represent that rook. I don't think they mean counter, they mean token now, but, you know, that's the word they used. Rook is treated exactly like a normal creature, except that it leaves play. So if it leaves play, it is removed from the game entirely, and it's a 0/3. So it kind of shows you how new some of these concepts were. There are not many tokens in the game. In fact, there was only one token generator in alpha, the Hive. And so this is another token generator. So this is like really, really kind of like following on from that. And also death triggers themselves. I mean, this is something that they use all the time now. And this was one of the first ones that really, really made an impact in Magic.
It's funny too, the two things that always stand out to me about the older cards like Rook Egg and these ones are, the first is, does it have that I get it factor, right? Just the thing that you read it and you go, oh, I see what you did there, right? With the designer, does that connection get made, or is it a little bit more blurred where I have to have it like explained? I'm like, oh, I see. So it's picking up the thing. Okay, I get it now. That kind of thing. Where a card like Rook Egg is just perfect, right? You're just like, I get it. The egg breaks, a rock comes out. It makes sense. The other thing that always stands out is how much cleaner the rules are. Like you just read all that text, well, it's removed from play entirely and it's treated as a thing. The Oracle text is, when Rook Egg dies, create a 4/4 red bird creature token with flying at the beginning of the next end step. It's just clean, like we have all these words.
And if you were to print it now, it would just do it now. It only did it at the beginning of the next end step because, I don't know, they thought it needed time to hatch.
Like that was some extra flavor that they put in. One of the things that's popped up a few times in the conversation, Luis, are these djinns, right? Like there's these kind of a cycle. There's just a lot of them because they were part of the lore here, but they're kind of interesting.
So there's a bunch of djinns and Ifrits. So here's some examples. Of course, Juzam Djinn, the king, 2 black for a 5/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, Juzam Djinn deals 1 damage to you. Or Serendib Ifrit, which is 2 and a blue for a 3/4 flying. Same, beginning of your upkeep, it does 1 damage to you. Or something like Mahai Djinn, which is like red for a 6/3. And then if you choose to attack with it, if you choose to attack with Mahai Djinn, flip a coin immediately after attack is announced. Opponent calls heads or tails while a coin is in the air. If the flip ends up in opponent's favor, Mahai Djinn is tapped but does not attack. So, and there's a couple more. There's like Yedwen Ifrit, which is Junun Ifrit is the one I was talking about. 1 black for a 3/3 flying, and you have to pay black during your upkeep or it is destroyed. So the common theme here is these cards were overrated, right? Like even back then they knew that. Like 4 mana for a 5/5 for Juzam was way better than normal. 3 mana for a 6/3 or 3 mana for a 3/3 flying. But they all came with drawbacks. And the reason that's a top-down is djinns and Ifrits in the kind of the lore of Arabian Nights were very powerful beings that would generally enact or, extract a cost from you to do what you wanted or to screw with you in some other way, right? These are the djinn, grants you a wish, but then twists the wording of the wish to not really do exactly what you want. And what was funny about all of these cards is when they came out, people didn't think they were good, largely. Look, I'm sure we've got a couple listeners who are like, yeah, I knew right away Juzam was great. But I say for the most part, the general public saw Juzam and was like, why would you play a creature that does 1 damage to you? Why would you play Serendib Ifrit in your deck? It deals damage to you, And the answer is the rate on these is absurd. Juzam Djinn is a 4 mana 5/5 where to get a 5/5 back then is that you're paying 5, probably 6 mana. So it's just not even close.
Arabians really just plays around with kind of like drawbacks in general. I mean, there's a lot of cards that kind of like look like cards that you wouldn't normally play if you were just looking at the text box. Like Gazban Ogre is a 1 green 2/2, and it says during its current controller's upkeep, the player with the highest life total takes control of it. So obviously 1 green 2/2 is above rate, at least back then it was. And the fact that you might actually lose it, is a drawback that you have to consider. It's like, okay, I need to be really, really aggressive. I need to play a Stompy style deck to make sure that I always have Gazban Ogre. And what it really allowed players to do is they kind of build arounds. They allow you to like look at the drawback and determine maybe if your deck can mitigate or if your playstyle can mitigate the drawback.
Yeah, it's funny. Some of the ones, that they've tried to kind of force through on the top down as well get kind of funny. One of the ones that's always stood out to me is Aladdin's lamp, because it's a fable or whatever that you hear a lot when you're young. But like they wanted to have it cost 10 mana, but they apparently didn't have the printing template set up to be able to put a 10. So it has 2 5 colorless mana symbols. So when you first read it, it looks like it costs 55 mana somehow, but it's actually just 5 and another 5. And then, they were going like, this to me is where a top-down design falls a little bit short, right? It's not terrible, but it's just like, okay, I kind of see what you were doing there. Like, you're supposed to get a wish out of this lamp or whatever. And what it does is it costs 10. It's an artifact. You can pay X and tap it. The next time I'm reading the Oracle text, the next time you would draw a card this turn, instead look at the top X cards of your library, put all of them on, but one on the bottom of your library in a random order, then draw a card, and X can't be 0. So again, like I kind of get it, right? Like I get, of the cards that I look at, I get my wish, the one that I want. But it isn't quite as resonant as some of the other cards that you guys have read here that have really kind of been home runs.
Yeah. And yeah, not everything here was a windmill slam win. Whereas, like when we move on to Antiquities, we'll see what the other side of this looks like. Or Arabian had a pretty high hit rate.
Arabian was remarkable for that. Yeah.
Well, Arabian was also worked on by Richard Garfield. I don't believe Antiquities was. Maybe you know better, TBS, but I believe
I'm not positive, but I think that might be true.
I'll double check that. I have the thing up somewhere. Go ahead.
So Arabian, one of the cool things too, that this is moving a little away from top-down design. One of the things that I think is pretty good for Arabian and where it benefited from is the cards from Arabian Nights generally aren't too parasitic. They're not too inward looking. Like you have Desert, and then which is the land that taps to deal 1 to an attacking creature after it deals its damage. You have Camel, which is 1 white for a 0/1 banding, and all creatures attacking in a band with Camel are immune to damage.
By the way, this is one of my favorite designs in the set.
Another good top down, but you have Camel and Desert Nomads, which we talked about earlier. But for the most part, these cards just fit into your decks. You can put Juzam in any black deck and you'll be pretty happy with the results. You can put a card like, Army of Allah, which not likely a name they would print these days. It's just way too real world. And, it's 1 white instant, all attacking creatures gain +2/+0 until end of turn. Like this card was actually really good back then. And, in like these white weenie style decks. And it's just a card that fits really well. And I can read off tons of cards like that. Even the Lowly Brass Man is a 1 mana 1/3, and it doesn't untap unless you pay 1 to untap it. But it's a 1 mana 1/3. That's pretty cool. And these cards don't, like, if you were to say like, okay, you have to add 10 random Arabian Nights cards to your deck, of the right colors, they would play pretty well. And I think that's important to note because when we look at Antiquities, that is not the case. So. And it's kind of funny that I wonder how it ended up that way, because if Arabians was indeed designed to play only within Arabian Nights, like it was a self-contained expansion, then I would have expected actually more parasitic designs. Right.
It's funny that some of the most simple designs are the easiest ones to overlook from Arabian Nights also, because we're so used to these things. Like one of them is Moorish Cavalry. It's 2 white for a 3/3, and it has trample. And you're like, okay, I don't really get it. Like, why does white have trample? Like, what's going on here? But just zoom back to they're horses. They literally have trample. Yeah. Like they trample over things. That's their whole purpose. So that would have made perfect sense, right? And this also highlights a point that I think we should talk about a little bit here, which is that the color pie, as we know it now, was not as defined then. Like the reason that Moorish Cavalry has trample is because there's horses. Right. It had nothing to do with like, well, this is what we want white to do. It was like, well, there's horses on this card, so they should trample because that's what horses do. Another one that's super simple is Giant Tortoise. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/1, but when it's untapped, it gets +1/+0/+3. And you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But it's like when you're young and you pick up this card and you go, oh, I get it. It's in its shell. And then when it's tapped, it's coming out of its shell. So it's vulnerable. So it's easier to kill when it's out of its shell. And you make these connections and then you go, I get this game. I understand how, these cards are designed now, even if, these two cards aren't really exciting, right? They're kind of just, random filler cards or whatever.
Yeah, and another card like that I always feel like it impacts kind of good design is like Curd Ape. Curd Ape feels like such a normal card now, but actually back then, I mean, I think there was Sedge Troll apart from that, but like Curd Ape is a 1 red 1/1, and if you have any forest in play, it's a 2/3, and I think it helps deck building. It tells a story. It's really simple. I think one of the things that's really good about Arabians actually is it learned that putting power in the creatures of the game, because I think Arabian's best cards are creatures, or at least a lot of its very, very good cards are creatures, like makes the game kind of like better and more interactive. I think some of the later sets, they took away a lot of power from creatures and they put them into other things like spells and lands, and that actually makes for a less interactive Magic. And so I think right now is like a lot of the modern designs actually you can see them in Arabian Nights, actually more so than if you looked at Arabian Antiquities or Legends or something like that. Those are much, much weirder, and when we get to them we'll be able to see that.
And they did a great job with Curd Ape too, because it does have that thing I just mentioned, which is the I get it factor, right? Oh, it's in its natural environment, so now it's better.
Yeah, and I mean, like some of the most impactful creatures, even for years later, Urnam Jinn, 3 and a green for a 4/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, you give a non-wall creature that your opponent controls Forest Walk.
Yeah.
So that's the drawback, is one of their creatures becomes unblockable, but it's a 4-mana 4/5. And yeah, it's a really good point, TBS. It's awesome how much power there is in Serendib, Urnam, Juzam, Curd Ape, like all of these creatures that I think all ended up making a pretty big impact. And I mean, there's the best spell in Arabian Nights, like is Drop of Honey probably, or Desert Twister or something like that. These are cards like Desert Twister is 4 green sorcery, destroy any card in play. And then Drop of Honey is a weird one. It's a green for an enchantment. During your upkeep, the creature in play with the lowest power is destroyed and cannot be regenerated. There's a tie, you choose which to destroy, and then you discard Drop of Honey if there's no creatures in play. But for the most part, all the of the 10 best Arabian Nights cards, especially back then when people are like Bazaar of Baghdad would not have made the list back then, because that card, that's the tap to draw 2, discard 3, busted in Vintage, banned in Legacy, all that. Because now that we actually have all these like ridiculous graveyard decks, back then Bazaar was not worth very much and not very good. So your top 10 list would have a bunch of awesome Jinns and Ifrits and then like a Library of Alexandria. So the power is so focused on creatures, and I think that is really good.
I think we should definitely talk about some of the cards you just mentioned, the non-basic lands. In fact, Arabians actually pioneered the concept of non-mana producing like non-basic lands, and actually a lot of the power in the set, I mean, came from these cards. Like Library of Alexandria was obviously probably the marquee card of the set when it comes to playability. It's a non-basic land. You can tap to add 1 colorless mana, or you can tap to draw a card if you have 7 cards in your hand. And obviously that's good now. I mean, having 7 cards, drawing an extra card, we all know is great. But at the time, I think people, I mean, they got that card advantage was good, but they didn't really, really know it.
Yeah, I mean, that term didn't really even exist, when Library of Alexandria came out. The term card advantage, was still a fledgling concept. So the fact that people did, I mean, we look at it now and that's like what is the most busted card in Arabian Nights? Is it just Library?
Yeah.
I believe I think Bazaar Baghdad's probably better, but I think for modern times, but back then Library is very close to it.
Yeah.
Right now.
On the very short list at least. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the designs that we really like, a lot of the top-down concepts and that kind of stuff. Now, what about the misses? What about the worst cards in Arabian Nights? Because, when they missed back in the day, they missed hard. And there's a few.
Oh, I mean, so, going back to kind of what we talked about last week when we were talking about some of the Mystery Booster playtest cards, there are Magic cards that are fun to read and not fun to play. And I believe Shahrazad, I also want to call it Shahrazad, but Shahrazad, it really hits top marks on that, where I think it is the worst design in the set when it comes to putting it on the stack, but a really, really charming design to read. It's white for a sorcery. Players must leave game in progress as is and use the cards left in their libraries with as decks in which to play a sub-game of Magic. This might be the only black bordered card that actually refers to Magic in its text. It breaks the fourth wall right away. When sub-game is over, players shuffle these cards, return them to libraries, and resume the game in progress, with the loser of the sub-game having his or her remaining life points rounding down. Effects that prevent damage may not be used to counter this loss of life. This sub-game has no ante. Using less than 40 cards may be necessary. So, when you cast Shahrazad, you start a new game with whatever's left in your deck against whatever's left in their deck. The loser of that game loses half their life. It's exactly the way the story works. In order to stop the first game from concluding, you just keep playing sub-games. And these sub-games are just ridiculous. There's some kind of funny stuff you can do, like cards exiled in a sub-game remain exiled. So I remember people using like Tormod's Crypt Shahrazad decks, or using Fork plus Shahrazad to copy Shahrazad to like play sub-game after sub-game after sub-game. It's not a good card to exist in terms of gameplay. It has been banned in basically every format. And even if it wasn't banned in something like Commander, which I assume it is, but even if it wasn't, if you cast this, I assume the table would just make you go play that sub-game by yourself. Because like, it's just a ridiculous card. That said, I think Shahrazad might be a net positive for Magic, and I know that's your position too.
I definitely think it's net positive. I mean, I totally agree with the kind of the miserable nature of like actually playing the card as written and having sub game after sub game after sub game. But firstly, I think it's really a flavor win. I think, as you said before, it really captures the flavor of the story, of her having to tell stories to basically continue the story as long as possible. The other part, at least for me as a creative person, is it shows that Magic is very malleable. That you can make anything happen in a game of Magic, using like versions of like the fact that you can tell this story in this way in Magic is a real testament to the rule set that Magic has. And so I think what it showed me as a younger designer is that you can make the game kind of do a lot of things that you don't think you should be able to do. And I think as a designer, you always want to keep your options open. And I think this will keep your creative, show you that creativity can still exist within a rule set.
A couple of things that stand out from the card as well are what you mentioned, Luis, where it actually says Magic on it, like it's referring to the game that you're playing. But also, what is this last part? The subgame has no ante. Okay, I get that. I remember how ante worked. It says using less than 40 cards may be necessary. Huh?
Well, it wasn't. I guess that's a reference to you have to play, like you're supposed to present a 40 card deck.
Is that what the rule was at the time? It wasn't 60? Oh, man, I didn't know that. God, that's funny.
Yeah, and so it's kind of clearing those things up. Though, to be honest, Shahrazad is not the worst design card in the set. I think that honor just has to go to City. So, City in a Bottle is a 2-mana artifact that says, let's see, all cards from Arabian Nights. So, okay, again, a little fourth wall breaking refers to the expansion name. All cards from Arabian Nights must be discarded from play except City in a Bottle. While City in a Bottle is in play, no further cards from Arabian Nights can be played. So this card does mean that by the time they were going to release Arabian, they already knew. I mean, for as long as this card is in the file, they knew that Arabian was going to be mixed with other cards. I don't think this wasn't designed to be played in an all Arabians format, because otherwise this card would make no sense. And the other thing is, it's not a horrendous top down in the sense that you understand, like, oh, you're putting everything, this whole city, this Arabian Nights, we're putting it all in a bottle. But the effect of this card is ridiculously bad. it just nukes all cards from an expansion and doesn't let you play new ones.
For
Like,
two colorless
it's one of the
mana.
least fun cards I can imagine.
And this card was good.
Oh, yeah.
Just let's be very, very clear. Like in Old School, which uses Arabians as one of the main sets of that format, City and Bottle is a very, very common sideboard card because like a lot of powerful cards like exist in Arabian Nights, and so this was kind of the catch-all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually own a couple Cities in a Bottle for Old School, and where you kind of want to use it is against the like Juzam Serendib deck that also happens to play 4 copies of City in a Brass, though you do too. It also hits Library. It just is a 2-mana card that has a really powerful effect, but saying, hey, you can't play any cards from the cool new set and no further one. It destroys all of them and you can't play new ones. That just doesn't sound very fun to me.
That has to be one of the worst design cards in the history of the game. I mean, it just does everything you don't want to. It takes you out of the mental space of the set that you're in. It rules wise. It just, yeah.
Well, it also starts to like kind of fall apart rules wise when like what is the Oracle text on this thing now? I'm actually kind of curious.
Whenever another non-token permanent with a name originally printed in the Arabian Nights expansion is on the battlefield, its controller sacrifices it, and players can't cast spells or play lands with a name originally printed in the Arabian Nights expansion. Come on.
So one of the reasons they have originally printed is actually another, maybe the worst design card in Arabian Nights is Arabian Nights Mountain. I don't know.
Well, they narrowly dodged it being the worst design. I don't think it is as it came out, but yeah, the lands were originally because Arabians was going to have different card backs, like you said, they were going to have the lands in it, and you know because they decided, oh, we need to. People know when they're drawing land or non-land, so we got to put the basics in Arabian Nights, which obviously isn't going to fix it when there's duels and all this other stuff, but whatever. And then Mountain was the only one that got left in when they all got pulled and they decided to use the original card.
Right. And so now, you can open up a pack of Arabian Nights and get only one type of basic land. It is Mountain, and it has the Arabian Nights expansion symbol, the scimitar on it, which is actually beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I love these things, but yeah.
I mean, I'd be happy to open Arabian Nights Mountains in every Arabian Nights pack I open. So
yes, you would. Yes, you would.
Well, they are quite a collector's item. But to what TBS was saying, if they had gone to print with basics with different land or in the whole set with different backs, that would have been a much, much bigger disaster than any individual card. So Mountain is emblematic of that. Though, as it turns out, Mountain worked out fine because it was just kind of like a misprint, but it didn't really harm anything.
It is funny. We mentioned the collectability of these cards. It is funny how things have panned out, in the current day. The most expensive card from Arabian Nights, it's Jizam Jinn. Yeah.
We've gone full circle.
You would think cards like Library of Alexandria and Bazaar of Baghdad would top that list because of their playability, where Jizam has fallen out of favor as far as playability goes. And in fact, Bazaar is second and Library is third.
Yeah.
But still, the Jizam is a significant chunk ahead of them. It's about $2,200 at the time of the recording. So
yeah, I mean, nostalgia is a hell of a drug. I mean, people like this card probably has the most nostalgia associated with it. It kind of checks the box for me as the best art in the set. I think it looks tremendous, especially in the black border. I mean, it's one of my favorite pieces of Magic art, and so that's why it's collectible, and it really shows what's important about Arabian Nights. It's like the tradition to it, the nostalgia is so important in Magic history.
What's your favorite art from the set, Luis?
Yeah. Oh, it's Juzam. Juzam's my favorite card in the set. It's just one of my favorite Magic cards, period. I nominally got Juzams for Old School, but it's really so I can just like look at them.
Okay, so
I think
we want to talk about Antiquities as well, but before we do, did you guys have any kind of conclusions or anything about Arabian Nights and its impact that it's had on Magic going forward?
I think Arabian was quite successful in terms of getting people new fun cards to play with. Checks that box, right? It's chock full of cards that I think play insanely well. And we didn't even cover like all of them because it's just, even for a 78 card set, which first of all, it blew my mind to learn it was 78 cards. Even today when we were prepping for this and I was talking to you guys, I was like, it's only 78 cards. It packs a lot of punch for a 78 card set. Like and then the second is it really expanded the imagination space of what can Magic be based on? What flavor can it have? Because if you didn't know much about Magic and someone showed you the alpha cards and the Arabian cards, you'd be able to really distinguish them as two different sets, as two different sets of cards with their own flavor and feel. Like, whereas that's not always true for Magic, and especially, I think that's one of the things the early sets did really well. Each one felt exceedingly different from others, for better or for worse. And I think Arabian did a really good job pushing the horizons of both flavor, resonance, seeing how these cards just look and feel awesome. But then also what TBS said earlier, where you'd read a card and be like, wow, they can do that. Magic can do that. Because there's a lot of cards in here that kind of pushes design space as well. So I think Arabian Nights, I still believe Alpha is the best design set of all time, but I think Arabian Nights would make the top 5.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree with, Yeah, I definitely agree with the top 5 thing. I'm just kind of flicking through a visual spoiler right now, and every one of these cards kind of like evokes something from me, whether the first time I saw it or a deck that I used to play it. It's amazing how few cards kind of like I've forgotten. I'm sure there's like plenty of cards from like subsequent sets that I was like, oh, this card basically has no impact on me. Even the commons of Arabian Nights like have a little bit of story and flavor, and some of that's personal. It's very anecdotal. Like I've played with the card myself, but some of it is just the story that is evoked from it and the design of it. I mean, I still see some of these designs as really, really head of its class. I think the focus that we had on Djinns and Ifrits earlier was really, really important too, because I think drawbacks were not a huge part of Alpha, and part of the identity of Arabian Nights is drawbacks, and it actually shows that drawbacks don't necessarily have to be bad. In fact, they're good drivers for people to build decks around, and just understand what's important in Magic.
And when you get around the drawback, like when you put Spirit Link on your Juzam Djinn, and so whenever it deals the 1 damage to you, gain life back, like you feel so clever. It's a really satisfying gameplay experience.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, those things are big.
Yeah. So I think Arabians is a terrific set. Obviously, there are some clunkers. The wording is still kind of like if Magic in its infancy, but I think it's a great set.
Okay, well, let's move on to Antiquities, which is the next expansion that came out. Again, Arabian Nights came out in December of 1993 and sold for a little over a month, official release. And then Antiquities came out a few months later in early March of 1994. This also came in booster packs with 8 cards in it. Technically speaking, the set has 100 cards in it, but it's actually closer to Arabian Nights because that's counting different artworks that they put on the same card. So, for example, their Strip Mine has a few different artworks, and the Urza lands, which we'll talk about in a bit, each have 3 different artworks as well. So that bumps the number up to 100. They printed about 15 million cards, according to Wizards. This set doesn't have any cycles, like that still wasn't a thing yet, but it did start a few sort of themes that would endure throughout the rest of Magic. And speaking of themes, TBS, maybe you can fill us in on kind of what was going on in the set, both thematically as far as how it was designed, and then maybe if there, I don't really know the story elements to it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Antiquities is the first artifact set. In fact, every card that is not a land actually refers to artifacts. In fact, and every land is colorless, which kind of implies that it's 4 artifacts. So it's really, really important. This is one of the first kind of like theme, it was the first theme set where the cards were kind of intended to be very interactive with each other. And as Luis kind of mentioned before, parasitic in some way. So there's a lot of like things like to do with artifacts, and you can manipulate artifacts in certain ways. And it's well before like the the Saga, which was kind of meant to be the first artifact set. This was the first artifact set. From a storyline perspective, this actually kicked off Magic's storyline as we know it. Antiquities itself is actually set on Dominaria, so obviously it's a plane that we've returned to since then, and it actually starts off the Brothers' War, which is actually the battle between Dominaria and Phyrexia. So so Urza and Mishra like are prominent figures in this storyline. They basically find some Thrawn artifacts that like explode, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, and basically release the Phyrexians on the multiverse. And so like this set still has a lot of like connections storyline wise to the story as we know it right now. So very, very relevant for right now.
Yeah, this is interesting too, because we see that both of these sets, Arabian Nights and Antiquities, are very focused, but they're focused on much different, not just different things, but different categories, right? Like Arabian Nights focuses on flavor based on the source text and the stuff that they used as the inspiration for the cards. But here they're focusing on artifacts, which is a card type, which is something completely different.
Yeah, Arabian, like, I don't know what the actual development process is, but it felt like for Arabian Nights, the process was, let's look at 1001 Nights and let's make as many cards as we can that basically tell these stories. And they did that. For Antiquities, it's, first of all, we're delving into this story. We're exploring, Urza, Mishra, Phyrexians, which is really funny because these, again, are still current Magic lore in a lot of ways. But let's play around with the card type artifact. What can we do with artifacts? Well, we can kill them. There's a bunch of ways to kill artifacts in the set, even in black, it's actually discard Gate to Phyrexia. This shows how bad black is at destroying artifacts. It's black for an enchantment. During your upkeep, you may sacrifice one of your creatures to destroy an artifact.
Oh, wow.
So,
this is great. You may not sacrifice a creature that is already on its way to the graveyard. We're kind of all on our way to the graveyard, right?
Ooh, it's got good flavor text too. The warm rain of grease on my face immediately made it clear I'd entered Phyrexia.
I wonder if this is the first mention of Phyrexia.
I think
this set has to introduce Phyrexia to right? It wasn't in alpha or anything.
Yeah, there's Gate to Phyrexia. There's Phyrexia Gremlins. It's a light touch, but I don't think it was not.
I think Urza and Mishra are in alpha, but I don't believe Phyrexia is.
Okay.
So, this set is extreme. Like to give you a kind of a snapshot, there's 7 cards of each color of the 5 colors.
Yeah, that means there's 40 something artifacts. Wow, that's like over half the cards in the set are just straight up artifacts.
Oh yeah.
And like TBS mentioned, every card that's not an artifact refers to artifacts. So, for example, for red, it's like 3 different ways to kill artifacts of those 7 cards. 3 different ways to sacrifice them, I think, and then a Dwarven Weaponsmith that is also actually. So red is 4 different ways to sacrifice artifacts and 3 different ways to kill artifacts. And so, look, let's get it out of the way now. I think that Antiquities is not a great set. I think it's actually a fairly poor one. It has definitely some cool cards, but it's way too parasitic where the average Antiquities card is just not going to be good in one of your decks. The artifacts are a little different because there's plenty of artifacts that work fine. These are almost like your normal cards because they don't have to refer to artifacts being an artifact themselves. But the average colored card from Antiquities is just completely useless. Like, we're Damping Field. Players may not untap more than 1 artifact during each of their own untap phases. How often is that going to have an impact on the game? Or like Power Artifact. The activation cost of an artifact is reduced by 2. Yes, you can put this in combo decks and make it go off, but it's so narrow. And I think as a result, Antiquities just doesn't play that well. And I suspect a lot of the people who opened Antiquities packs looking for cards to put in their decks were kind of disappointed.
I wonder how that played out, right? There is this weird line that the designers have to straddle when it comes to selling cards to the public, right? Because on one hand, like if you opened up an Arabian Nights booster, for example, you might be excited because there's a card that you understood the design behind and thought it was cool. And that might be the case here too. But then you also have this other hand where but I also want to play with these cards. And even if there wasn't a robust tournament structure at the time, and even if, there wasn't formats and things out there, it's a game. Everybody knows that you're trying to win the game that you play. Right. So, they did want to put cards into their deck that were relevant to what they were doing. And, if you opened up Damping Field, you're just well, I'm not going to play this, right? These aren't cards that even, Timmy's, for example, right? The sort of baseline archetype for a Magic player, which is everybody loves it when people do big stuff, right? Big, exciting, splashy things have always been exciting in Magic. And that doesn't even touch that. That doesn't even, if you're a Timmy, you're looking at that and you're going, yeah, what's next? Give me something better.
Yeah, I mean, also, if your deck didn't have anything to do with artifacts going into Antiquities, what the hell are you doing here? If I had a white weenie deck, right? If I have a white weenie deck, there's I was trying to go through the set. There is not one card that I'd want to put into a white weenie deck, and that's almost nowadays. If you couldn't find one white weenie to find and to put into your white weenie deck, that would be very, very weird. But now with the structure of Antiquities, there's just plenty. Maybe Mishra's Factory. I think that's actually probably something. And then we'll talk about Mishra's Factory later. But there's just not that many cards that go into a variety of decks. In fact, they go to very, very specific decks.
So in your opinion, TBS, is this set too narrow?
I think it is, though. I think the concept of having a narrow focus set is fine. I think later on, there's been other themed sets that I think have had better balance to everything. If you look at something like Theros as an enchantment set, it's not 100% focus on enchantments, but it has enough stuff that enough handholds for you to want to build enchantment decks without kind of making the focus so blind. So in some ways, I think Antiquities is a cool experiment that they learned from, and they've changed how they've done designs. But insofar as something that hitting the bullseye, I think it's pretty far off the mark. I generally agree with Luis about this. But it does have some cool designs that actually have opened up design space. I'm just going to go straight into it. The one that really, really has opened up a lot of design space is Millstone. So Millstone is a 2-mana artifact. Yeah. Most people know this card. It's a mono artifact, which basically means it taps. And it's 2-tap. Take the put 2 cards from target player's library into the graveyard. And that now it's just common parlance that you putting cards from library to graveyard is milling. And this was the first card that really, really did it well, and did it as a strategy to win the game itself. And so, this is a card that I think has huge impact to Magic. In fact, probably one of the highest impact cards of any card to kind of Magic design and Magic kind of design space. And it started in Antiquities. And Antiquities does have quite a few, I'll call them pillar concepts that, we still see to this day.
Yeah, what do you think about Millstone, Luis? Because this is one of my favorites when I played back in the day, and it addresses a rule that really didn't come up that often before, which was if you can't draw a card with an empty library, you lose the game.
Yeah, I think that it's alternate win conditions can be really cool. I think Millstone actually bordered on being too good because if it's a commonly played win condition, I don't think it's the most fun. But honestly, I think that it did so much for the imagination space of Magic that I think it's definitely a win. And I agree with TBS that this is a really cool card. Kind of a flip, to that is Feldon's Cane. It's a 1-mana artifact. You pay 0, reshuffle your library or your graveyard into your library. If Feldon's Cane is used, remove it from the game, returning it to its owner's deck only when the game is over. So it's 1 mana, and you can exile it to shuffle back your graveyard into your library. First of all, it's a natural counterpoint to Millstone. Second, this gave people another way, Time Twister being the other, of getting cards from their graveyard back into their deck. And people love that. This card was actually restricted for a while, which is kind of bonkers because it's just not that good of a card. But Feldon's Cane was definitely a very high impact card back then, and it played the nice counterpoint to Millstone. I honestly think that my favorite design in Antiquities, I think, is Ornithopter.
Oh yeah,
I think I think Ornithopter was actually mind-blowing. So it's 0 mana for a 0/2 flyer. You might recognize it because it gets printed over and over again. In fact, one of the jokes, I think it was the Mirrodin flavor text of Ornithopter, was like, every developing society or artificers managed to invent the Ornithopter.
Yeah, it says, regardless of the century, plane, or species, developing artificers never fail to invent the Ornithopter. It's just, it has been reprinted a million times, too.
Well, it was the first 0 mana creature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we ended up seeing kobolds and legends, which we'll talk about when we get to that episode, but another 2 years. But Ornithopter is a 0 mana 0/2 flying. I remember when I first saw it, I'm like, why would you not always play this card?
I always ran 4.
It costs 0
I ran
mana.
4 in every deck.
And the reality is there's a very high cost to put in cards that don't do anything in your deck, and Ornithopter kind of did nothing. Mm-hmm. Though, ironically, it has seen lots of play in actual like modern affinity. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a powerful card in those decks. But we saw Ornithopter back then, and it was just like, you can make creatures that cost 0. That's amazing. And it's a flyer. It's just so perfect. So I think Antiquities did have a number of hits. Like, I'm not saying this was a complete miss. And it, again, just like we give extra credit to Alpha and Arabians for being trailblazers, we need to give that to Antiquities also. Even though the execution of the all artifact set, I think, left something to be desired, the fact that they tried to make a set this focused was really cool. And it also, again, kind of paved the way to doing so. I think that when you make an artifact based set, well, first of all, you have to be very careful because they always break. Mm-hmm. If you look at Kaladesh and Mirrodin and take some lessons there. But second, you don't have to make every single card in the set do something with artifacts. Like, that's too much. And I think that they ended up being a little bit too aggressive.
Do you imagine, Luis, if you were working on the design team at the time, that there was just a mandate that they just said literally every card has, that's not a land has to do this?
Well, I don't know if it's a mandate as much as that this was probably when they discussed, what's okay, we're going to make the artifact set. So we'll make it half artifacts, more than half artifacts. And all the cards have to do with artifacts because this is the artifact set. And then that was just like the baseline, where it came from. And I would have liked to see probably like half the cards in each color, maybe have slightly few more cards in each color, and then like have half of them not necessarily just completely artifact.
I think one of the things they may have gone through in the design is they thought, well, artifacts can be placed into any deck. So, almost by definition, that's true. So this could be a card type that, could expand every deck. And so probably I'll give them a little bit of credit. It's like they probably didn't think that they were going to make, I think that they thought they could impact every deck with this set. What they turned out doing was the cards are just so narrow or very, very kind of situational that wasn't true. But in concept, an artifact set can actually be accessible to every like style of player and every style of deck. So I will think that when they were thinking about designing the cards, they probably had some idea of playability in mind.
Okay.
Well, I also think it's worth noting that the overall power level of the set, I would say, is a substantial amount lower than Arabian Nights. The best card in Antiquities, well, the best card now is Mishra's Workshop, but back then it wasn't as powerful just because artifacts were generally worse and it was hard to make as focused of a deck. The best card then was likely Strip Mine. I would be surprised if it was anything else. And Strip Mine's a pretty terrible card to have as your best card. This is a land that taps for a colorless, or you can sack it to destroy any land. Not just non-basics, any land. And just Strip Mine soon became, it got restricted eventually, but it was just a 4-of in a lot of decks because you just strip mine their first 2 lands and sometimes they just lose.
And it leads to a lot of non-action, right? By both players too, which is just like, why have that in your set? It is interesting to note that while the average card quality is very low, they did hit some very high highs. You mentioned Strip Mine as being one of the most powerful, as well as Mishra's Workshop, probably the most busted card that's a land that taps to add 3 mana to your mana pool. You can only play it to cast art. You can only use it to cast artifacts, but come on, like that is 3 mana. Like, okay, I'll play artifacts. And speaking of 3 mana, this is the debut of the Urzatron lands, as we call them now. Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. And, these, at least in modern times, are very powerful still, and they were back then. If you get all 3 of them on the battlefield, they tap for 2, 2, and 3 mana respectively.
They were really cool back then. They weren't that
How
good.
come?
Because there was just no way to assemble them reliably. Because there was no Ancient Stirrings or Sylvan Scrying or Expedition map. Here's a funny anecdote, actually. Zvi Mashowitz, who's a Hall of Famer, he used to write an article for The Dojo, which is the first Magic site, where he would take deck submissions and help people fix their decks. And I remember sending him an Urza Tron deck that was trying to assemble Tron and play expensive spells like Mind Warp and Triskelion. And I remember him basically telling me my deck was bad.
but you sent that in to him?
Yes.
Oh man, that's crazy. You got to find that.
Yeah.
You don't have your GeoCities email or whatever?
No, this was Web TV or something. I don't remember,
man.
but I remember being so thrilled that he wrote about it.
Well, you're before your time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that actually kind of like really dovetails well into 2 of my favorite cards in Antiquities is like Triskelion and Tetraverse. I think these cards are like just super cool in how they play. Triskelion is a 6 mana artifact creature. It comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters, and then you can like remove a counter to basically ping a creature, do 1 damage to it. And it's a 1/1. So it's a 6 mana 4/4, but then it has the utility of being able to do some direct damage to creatures or players. And I mean, back then this is a quite a rare ability, and it often, at least in the decks that I played at the time, kind of acted as a good win condition because it had so much flexibility. Tetraverse, I think it was less good, but I feel like it was cooler in concept. I mean, it's a 6 mana flying artifact creature. It's also 1/1, and it also comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters, but you can actually remove a counter to make a 1/1 flyer, and then you can actually pay 1 to put it back on to the Tetraverse itself. So it kind of like has this concept of, actually, I don't think you can put it back off. Sorry.
Yeah, you can't. So it's at the beginning of your upkeep.
That's right.
You can. This is the current text, by the way. You
That's
can exile any number of the Tetravites,
Yes.
and if you do, the counters go back on Tetravis. And at the beginning of your upkeep,
So,
you can also remove them, to make them into Tetravites. Yeah.
So the counters go on and off just during
that's
that.
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a cool concept of like something that getting bigger and smaller and kind of going into many pieces. I just really, really enjoyed those cards, and honestly, they were pretty close in power level. I wouldn't say like they were like off the charts too good out of Antiquities, but they're pretty solid power level cards.
Yeah, funny. Triskelion, the original Walking Ballista. Just picking up counters and throwing them around.
Yeah, with the old like War of the Worlds or whatever that is. There's the robot looks like one of the old.
It does, yeah, from a '50s movie or something. What are other cards that you wanted to highlight as being potentially great or whatever, Luis?
What's funny is when looking for top downs, I'm just not really finding very many.
That's interesting. Yeah.
There's our Giving Archaeologist is 1 white for a 1/1 with a picture that looks like a grad student from like 1980. It actually does. It just looks like a normal dude wearing khakis and a blue shirt.
He's wearing a t-shirt.
Yep. It's 1 white for a 1/1, and you can pay white and tap it to return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. So, like, sure, that's a top down. It's an archaeologist. It digs up artifacts.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good design, right?
I think that design is fine. I'm just saying, like, the resonant top downs here are just not. I'm just not seeing them compared. It's not even in the same ballpark. Whereas Arabians had like 20 or 30 insane top downs and a bunch more. These just don't tell a story. Like, there's Racolite. It's a 6 mana artifact. You can pay 2 to prevent 1 damage to any target. And if you use this, return it to its hand at the end of turn. So this is a card that like has an effect and it's not very good, but I don't care too much about that. But what is the story behind a Racolite? If I told you I'm going to make a Racolite, you're like, I don't know. Or Onulet. This is actually a really charming card. It's 3 mana for a 2/2. And if it goes to the graveyard, its controller gains 2 life. So it's a 3 mana 2/2 that dies and gains you 2 life. Actually a really pleasant card to play with, and I think one of the better designs in the set. But if I were to say like, oh, I'm going to make an Onulet, and here's the design, you're like, oh, that's a cool card. I don't get the concept. It's not a top down. It's just a cool card. And that's just over and over and over in the set is just a bunch of cool Magic cards. Some cooler than others, but like none of them are really like, oh, I get the story of Aladdin, or or even like going to more modern times, like Form of the Dragon is always heralded as one of the best top downs in Magic. This is the 4 red enchantment from Scourge, I think it is, where it's, or it might just be Onslaught, where it's 4 red. It's an enchantment. Creatures without flying can't attack you. At the beginning of upkeep, deal 5 damage to any target, and at the end of your turn, your life total becomes 5. It just turns you into a dragon. You just become a 5/5 flying dragon. And that's just an incredibly good top down, and that does not trade on real world stories or anything like that. So even removing that part, Antiquities, I think, could have done a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of that here too, right? There's just a lot of cards that you go, okay, cool, but you're kind of shrugging at.
Yeah, I hope that I'm going to defend Antiquities a little. I do think it does have a couple cooler ones, and I may be wrong about this. Titania's Song, I believe, refers to the Shakespeare character from Midsummer Night's Dream. It's actually one of my favorite cards. So it's a 1 green and 3 enchantment. Basically, all non-creature artifacts in play become artifact creatures with their power toughness equal to their cost. Titania is a fairy queen. So in the story, she actually kind of falls in love with a mechanical, which is not actually mechanical the same as an artifact, but storyline wise, you could imagine that being a fairy, she's turning artifacts into people. And so I think it's a pretty cool card, and it kind of used a concept that was pretty new. There was animate artifact in alpha, but I do think that this card actually does tell a cool story and actually is in theme. I think it's one of the things that Green kind of did at the time was, manipulate artifacts in an interesting way. And probably my favorite and probably my most played Antiquities card is Mishra's Factory. I like this card on many levels. I like how it looks. I like how it plays. So Mishra's Factory is a colorless land that basically you can tap for a colorless. Or you can pay 1 to make it a 2/2 assembly worker creature. It's the first creature land. And so this is something that has become really, really important in the history of Magic. I mean, like having your lands have more utility than just making mana has just kind of really been a foundation stone of what I call modern Magic. And so it's cool to see that it started off in Antiquities. And also it's pretty good. It still gets played in some formats. I mean, Old School definitely plays it, and I'm pretty sure if it was in Standard,
still gets played in Vintage.
So this is an important card that is really, really important to Magic design, especially.
Yeah, this one is actually, I think, a really great one to highlight because it really shows, I think, both of your points really strongly in that Mishra's Factory is just cool. Like, you get it. It's neat. It's a fun card. They did a neat thing with the art where there's 4 different artworks for it in the set and one of them for each season. So one of them has snow on it and etc. But also, what is it? Like, what? Right? Like, to Luis's point, it's like, it's a factory that I can attack with. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it doesn't... it doesn't hit in a resonant, flavorful way like some of the other cards that we've been talking about, where you're just like, I get it. I see what you did there. There is no I see what you did there here. It's just sort of like, I happen to like it because it's good. It works. It's cool. These type of things. So it kind of covers both bases in a strange way. What are the worst designs, by the way, in this set?
There's so many of them.
Well, we got a nice one to start with. Golgothian Silex. It's 4 mana. It's a mono artifact. You could pay 1. all cards from the Antiquities expansion, including Golgothian Silex, must be discarded from play. Why is this a note we need to hit again?
Also, they made it more. They nerfed it, right? Like
Yes.
it's a wrath for all things from Antiquities, but it costs more than City in a Bottle, and it doesn't have the static effect of just, like keeping new things from hitting them. It's like, that was too much, guys. We still need this effect, obviously, right? We can't print a set without some way to hose literally every card in the set.
Yeah.
But we need to tone it down a little. So that's what they did. That is just a hilarious. It is funny because it's like a 3-act play, right? It's like City in a Bottle, too strong. Golgothian Silex, little bit less, and then the third act is, wait, we just don't do this. Like, this just shouldn't be a thing we ever do.
There's one more.
Is there?
Yes. When we get to the Homelands episode, you'll have the final of tragic end of this trilogy. But
that's funny. What are some of the other standout bad designs?
For me,
because a lot of them are just fall flat, right? Like a lot of them are like what Louis said, like Damping Field, where it's not like it doesn't stand out as some horrendously bad. It's just like you just don't ever play it. Like nobody plays the card. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, the worst design, and it's more that it's just bad, but I don't even get what's going on here. It's Mishra's War Machine. Mishra's War Machine is a 7-mana artifact creature. It's a 5/5. It bans. It doesn't have banding. It bans. I don't know why it says it bans. During your upkeep, discard one card of your choice from your hand, or Mishra's War Machine, becomes tapped and does 3 points of damage to you. This is a 7-mana 5/5 that has a drawback, and a pretty big drawback. I can't imagine a deck that actually wants to have this card in the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, this card... It doesn't even particularly tell a story. Though, the worst design in Antiquities by far has to just be Strip Mine, right?
I guess so.
How do you argue against Strip Mine? It's just all this does is make games worse. It also makes it so it punishes the mana bases, which were really bad back then. It just leads to people not casting spells.
I do think, yeah.
Like, what's good about this card?
I do think they probably printed Strip Mine after printing all the cool lands in Arabians and the cool lands, or less cool lands in Antiquities. And so they probably was like, okay, we need something to have a check to that. Now, obviously, they could have done something like Wasteland, but they didn't have the concept non-basic. So Strip Mine was meant to be the balance to that. Now, obviously, it was used for more evil purposes, but like basically after you got him to Turak a few times, you also had no lands. But
well, it also rewarded people who had moxes and punished people who didn't.
Yeah,
so
TRGR.
But yeah, it doesn't lead to really good games at all.
No, I think Luis is right. I mean, especially if you wanted to do it based on impact, right? Like which one of these cards had the most negative impact on the most number of Magic players? It has to be Strip Mine. I mean, how many people quit Magic back then because they just got strip mined out of too many games, didn't have them themselves, and were just like, I'm not doing this. Like, this is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that was a sizable number.
Yeah, it's probably quite a bit. Even though I have to say, as a design, it works, right? Like it,
Well, I think it's a bad design.
No. What I mean is, as a top down, like it's like, oh, it's a strip mine. Like it's stripping away the functionality of your land.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is
it's a solid top down in that sense.
Otherwise, it's a horrendous failure and one resigned to the dustbin for the most part. There are not many formats you can play strip mine in still. In fact, hilariously, the one where it's just straight up legal is Commander. the most casual format is the one where you can play it.
Old school, you can play. Yeah, in some old school rule sets lets you have 4, some let you have 1,
and you can play 1 in Vintage. So there you go. Okay, so should we move to the conclusions here for Antiquities?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think we can actually kind of bundle the conclusions here for both sets a little bit.
So let's talk about it, because there's the big picture, right? There's the idea of expansion sets, what they mean, how they're implemented, that type of thing, and then there's kind of the conclusions for each of them. So start big picture.
I think big picture, these sets did what they were, I think, meant to do, which again, push the imagination space of Magic, give people new cards to play with. I think Antiquities, Arabian Nights, and Legends in particular all had a really strong theme, and it dropped off significantly after that with Dark and like Homelands and Fallen Empires, where Legends had gold, Antiquities had artifacts, Arabian Nights, well, I guess it was just the Arabian Nights. It didn't have a mechanical theme quite as much. But these themes all did a really good job of saying, like, wow, they can do that, like I said before. And I think Antiquities does score highly on that. Like, even if I think the execution was a little lacking for how fun these cards or usable these cards actually were, the fact is Antiquities gave this shined a light on this one card type, showed you all the different ways you could interact with it, showed you that non-basic lands could continue to be cool. It did a lot of really cool stuff, and both Arabian Antiquities, I think, pushed the borders of Magic in a really powerful and good way.
What do you think, TBS?
Yeah, no, I generally agree with that. I think expansions were there's no guarantee that they were actually going to be good for Magic, and so it was good that both Arabians and Antiquities showed that you could actually expand Magic without just being the same. I think a lot of expansions to games don't push the boundaries enough. And I like the kind of audacity of both these sets in trying to kind of redefine what Magic is, but also being still tied to the main rule set. Obviously, we both agree that Arabian Nights probably did that better, but Antiquities probably has a lot more lessons, I guess, for Magic as a whole. And you get to see those lessons kind of reverberate through the latter expansions. I also think, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, what do you think the takeaways were from both of the sets? Like, if you were to rewind in time and do kind of a lessons learned or a postmortem on the sets, at the time, what were the things that they got right, and what were the things that they said, well, we don't want to do that again?
Yeah, I think the lessons they got right is top down is the most kind of powerful thing you can do for designing cards. I think people intuitively get them. People appreciate the stories that get told from top-down designs. And honestly, 25, 30 years down the line, we still remember the top-downs much better than we do the mechanical cards. So I think that's the first lesson. Mm-hmm. The second lesson is about what Louise said. Basically, you can kind of go deep on a mechanic. You do have to be on a card type, you have to be a bit careful. Antiquities went a bit far, but you can actually show and showcase and highlight, and you can see all the different ways colors kind of interact with artifacts. You can see all the ways that artifacts can be used and manipulated. In fact, I think Antiquities did a lot to what is the extent of the what can artifacts do. I think Antiquities actually showed that. And also I think non-basic lands have been really, really important. I think non-basic lands may be the most powerful card type in the history of Magic in general. And you really get to see them on display in these two sets. And so I think that lesson is actually really, really important. And the fact that lands get put into nearly every deck really kind of makes them important to deck building and in players' minds.
What are the takeaways for you, Luis, if you were to rewind in time?
Well, I think that Antiquities showed the power of focusing on a specific theme, especially a mechanical theme, and also showed that you don't have to make it quite so drastic. Mm-hmm. Legends has a lot of problems, but Legends was not particularly parasitic, which I think is a strength for Legends. And Antiquities was probably the high point of any set that is this kind of inwards looking. And I think I can only assume that the lesson from that was, hey, we don't need to hit this quite that hard. Antiquities would have been the artifact set, even if half the colored cards had nothing to do with artifacts. Right. It didn't need 100% compliance. I also think that, one of the things we talked about in the alpha review was every way there was to manipulate every permanent kind of existed, right? They had one of everything, change a color, change, different text. Here's a way to steal a thing. Here's a way to destroy a thing. Antiquities kind of takes that and runs with it. And now there's all these different ways to kind of interact with artifacts, and artifacts are an intrinsically cool card type. So I think that's an issue either. I think that it it did a good job of making you care about these things. And even if I don't think the top downs are great, I do think that these cards are cool. Like, they did look cool. Not as cool as Legends. Legends kind of knocks it out of the park in that regard. But I think that there was some really cool stuff going on in Antiquities. I think Arabians was such a slam dunk, but also I think that they wisely moved away from using real world inspiration to that degree. So Arabians did, again, they got to put their thumb on the scale a little bit and say, like, well, we're going to take these like really awesome stories that have been told for thousands of years and we'll make cards out of them. And yeah, that was really cool. And I love Arabians. You can't keep doing that. Like, I actually think Magic is better for having Nylea and Thassa rather than actual, like, you know, Zeus and Persephone and Hades. So I think that Magic is actually better for that, despite it being so good for Arabian Nights. So I think they learned from Arabian Nights how successful that could be, but also wisely didn't run it back exactly the same way, despite, I'm sure, there being temptation because of how cool Arabian Nights was. Yeah. So I think that was really good.
And by the way, you were right. Richard Garfield was on the design team for Arabian Nights, but not Antiquities. Yeah.
And then kind of like the bottom line, though, I think Arabians was better. I think Arabians was just a better set. Even one of the smaller things which TBS mentioned was it put a lot of its power in creatures. I think that's awesome. Like, Antiquities puts a lot of power in strip mines and Mishra's factories, you know, in the lands. Whereas Arabian puts just a ton of power in creatures, and I think that is really, really good. I think it's got better top downs. It's a more resonant set for sure. And I think overall the cards fit in better with Magic in general than Antiquities, where you kind of struggle sometimes to figure out where exactly and how exactly to use these cards.
I think if you kind of modernized Arabians, as in like just wording wise, and you just printed it, you would actually get pretty close to like a modern set. I'm not saying it's not like perfect, obviously there's power level problems, but it kind of mimics a modern set much, much better than Antiquities does.
Oh, of all the first 5 expansions, Arabians is the only one you could even come close to doing that with. Reprinting Antiquities, Legends, The Dark, Fallen Empires, Homelands would just, you know, even Ice Age would not be a very good idea. Whereas Arabian Nights has a lot more modern sensibilities.
First thing that comes to mind, Luis, what's your favorite card from this two blocks? These two sets. I mean,
it's got to be Juzam Djinn. I love Juzam more than basically anything else. Like, it's just one of my favorite cards in Magic overall. And I find Juzam to be a really satisfying card to play with, to look at, to think about, like all of those things.
What about you, TBS?
Oh man, he kind of took the one.
Oh yeah, I took the good answer. Hey, welcome to the world of podcasting, my friend, where you get put on the spot.
I mean, so one of my favorite cards that we haven't even mentioned yet. And it really has, I can't even explain exactly why I really like this card, is Elephant Graveyard. Elephant Graveyard is it's a non-basic land from Arabian Nights. Taps are colorless, but it also taps to regenerate a elephant or a mammoth. I think that's the wordings. For some reason, when I saw the card first, it made me go through spoilers and look for all the elephants and mammoths that like I could regenerate. Yeah. And I think that's really, really important for back then. The exploration that allowed you to do. I just think that a card like that for me. Also, I really like the art as well. It's kind of very evocative of an elephant graveyard. But it just made me kind of like explore Magic in cool ways, and I love cards that do that.
Yeah, you know, the card for me that did that from these sets was Atog. In a similar way, looking for ways to generate lots of artifacts to feed to the Atog. And even if the payoff ended up being, you know, Atog grows bigger for each artifact that you sacrifice to it, but it's temporary. You know, that's the type of thing that does the same. It prompts the same type of action that you just described, which is you start looking through and you start not only looking for cards that are artifacts, but looking for cards that produce artifacts or make multiple ones, like Tetravis and stuff like that. So you're like, oh, I get it. I can feed more to my Atog and keep it happy.
I remember when I first played against someone who had an Atog Berserk deck. Berserk doubles a creature's power and gives it trample, and then it dies in a turn. And it was so cool.
Yeah, like that's an awesome thing too. Also, that's one of the more resonant artworks for me was Atog. Okay, well, let's call it a show there, guys. Great stuff. Super interesting to look back, especially when you see how regimented things are these days. the way sets are produced and how, there's so much similarity between sets, which is a real strength, but they're different enough to feel different and play different. They really put in a lot of work over the years to get it to the point that it's at. And you can see these first few stabs at expansions. They were nowhere near where they are now with this stuff. One of the big limiting factors seems to just be the fact that these were 78 card sets. There's just not a whole lot you can do in that space, which again, you guys mentioned it, but I think it's a testament to Arabian Nights that it was able to have even somewhat well-rounded set with so few cards. But really, really fun to walk down memory lane and to take a look at these. And hopefully we'll get a chance to come back and keep it rolling, because there's some absurd sets that came out after this. Legends was just ridiculous. And then, the dark days of Homelands and those type of sets as well. Those will be fun to talk about too.
Let's do it sooner than two years from now.
Okay. Yes, I agree. I agree to these things. So let's call it a show there. First things first, we got to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Again, 12 days leading up to Christmas holiday. You can find deals on there. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, it's channelfireball.com/newsletter. There's 3 different ones. One by Scott-Vargas, the guy that's on the show, who does standard and sort of current era stuff, whatever he feels like doing. There's a modern/pioneer one by Matt Nass, and then there's a commander one by the Raging Levine, Eric Levine. Channelfireball.com/newsletter for those. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR. Luis is LSV, and TBS, you are TBS Dash.
That's
still
correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put a link to that in the notes so people can find you and ask you questions or whatever about the stuff that we talked about here, or just say hi. TBS, I want to say thank you, particularly to you for making the time to join. I didn't mention at the top, but TBS is actually in his home country of Australia right now on a big trip with his, significant other plus kid. So you guys are on a major trip here as of late, and you took some time out of it to come hang out with us. We want to say thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
I wouldn't miss it.
Certainly.
And where else can people find, where are you doing anything else? You got anything else going on that you want people to check out? Are you streaming? Are you a podcaster now? You got anything?
I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break from kind of content creation right now.
Okay, because
international man of mystery. That's his
also known as a dad. He's got a full-time job there. All right, and we'll look forward to having you back on the show. Hopefully sooner than that almost 2-year mark, so we can continue these shows. These are really fun, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, TBS. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this one. Again, you can find us all over the place, and we'll be back. Well, probably going to do the Limmies next week. We got to get those in before the end of the year, so maybe that'll be what the show is. I'll talk to you about that after we're done with the show, Luis. But for now, we'll see you next time.
All right, quick hits because I'm very late for a meeting now. Talking Arabian was awesome. Marshall, what's the best card you've ever opened in a booster pack?
Foil Karn.
Okay. TBS?
I've actually opened a original Nicol Bolas in my first Legends pack.
Nice. That is awesome. I had the pleasure of opening a Library of Alexandria in an Arabian Nights booster pack.
What?
I had to win a tournament to win the booster pack. I ended up it was a 5th edition sealed deck, and I won the tournament, and I got to pick one of the 2 Arabian Nights packs the store had, and I think I picked the right one.
That's incredible.
Though I suppose the beta draft was pretty good. But winning a tournament to win that one booster pack was pretty sweet. And this brought me all back. So anyway, that was just a quick hit. But thanks again, TBS. These are really fun. I love talking about these old sets. And I look forward to the next time. See you, everyone.